Welcome back, baseball fans, to the 70-73 Carryover League. Tonight we're going to start looking at transactions that occurred after the 1969 season that I might consider as possible trades for this Carryover League to be executed during the Hot Stove League. You know, in the cold winter months when we're contemplating trades before spring training. Of course, I can't match up all these transactions because the talent is distributed differently through 32 teams instead of Major League Baseball's 24 teams. However, one thing I like to do is, if it comes to a blockbuster trade, a very, very, very important trade, subjective of course, in baseball history, I try and somehow get the parties to their rightful destination. One player that comes to mind in this particular discussion would be Joe Morgan, the Hall of Famer, who in 1972 goes from the Astros to the Giants. But it happens in 1972. We still are playing 70, 71, 72, and 73. And so I have to take the look of the Astros as commissioner and say, understand that the Astros are probably saying, please don't expedite this transaction. Let us have Joe for 2 more years. 70 and 71, he's an Astro. So there's no reason to hurry it up. He'll have plenty of time in Cincinnati from 72 all the way to 80. So there's no reason to hurry that up. And when I do make the trade, the players moving around might be a little bit different. Another player I got to mention while we're on this subject that I did move around is Tom Seaver in the other league, in the 77-80 league, right? So with Seaver, you know, he goes from the Mets to the Reds in 77. So I can just I'll show you briefly in his transactions how it went down historically. This huge, okay, so traded by the Mets to the Reds for Doug Flynn, Steve Henderson, Dan Norman, and Pat Zachary. Well, I changed that. I did have the Mets and the Reds do a transaction. I had Tom Seaver go to the Reds. But I put Pete Rose in the deal. I put Charlie Hustle in the deal. Let me show you something here. I mean, this is, if you're going to put Tom Seaver in a trade, then you may as well make it a super major blockbuster. So I put Pete Rose in that deal instead of the guys you saw. It's pretty much almost a straight up trade because I knew that we're talking about the years of 77, 78. He's pretty much near the end of his rope with Cincinnati anyway. He's still a great ball player. And then he gets to Philadelphia through free agency. And I don't have free agency. I don't do free agency in my league. So I'm going to let him appear on one of Philadelphia's rivals for a couple years through the 78 campaign, and then I'll get him to Philadelphia. So I will get Pete Rose on the Phillies by his 1979 card, where he lights it up again with a .331 batting average. So just letting you know that I do kind of follow the general history, but with Pete Rose, I went outside the lines a little bit, and still did something I thought was fair in this particular instance. I didn't just hand him to the Philadelphia Phillies for nothing and just give him a Hall of Famer, asterisk. So I gave him to one of the Phillies' rivals for a couple of years. So with all this being said, let's take a look now at the 1969 transactions, because we know the 69 cards have been pulled out, of course. They've long been filed away. And we're going through the end of this year, and again, in Major League Baseball, the Orioles and the Mets are getting ready for a World Series, that the Mets will win in 5 games. You know all about that stuff. And so after the World Series, this is where I want to look at some transactions and see if there are any that I will do. And the first that comes up that I will look at here is the Phillies. This is the big one. Trade Dick Allen, Jerry Johnson, and Cookie Rojas to the Cardinals for Byron Brown, Curt Flood, Joe Horner, and Tim McCarver. Curt Flood refused to report to his new team. And then the Cardinals sent Willie Montanez, a nice little piece of the 1970s, and another guy to the Phillies to complete the trade. Well, what has happened is, and I can't really keep flipping through this and explaining it to you by the spreadsheets. You have to just take my word for this. I decided to move Dick Allen to the White Sox in one transaction. Because in looking at Dick Allen's years in 70 and 71 for the Cardinals and the Dodgers, they weren't nearly as good as they were for the White Sox in 72 and 73. So I had that transaction happen this current offseason in a trade that sent Orlando Cepeda to the Phillies from the White Sox, because Cepeda had a monster year as well. And by the way, Curt Flood ended up on the Phillies as part of the Rick Wise Steve Carlton trade. So I matched up bits and pieces of baseball history. I elected to skip the Dick Allen tenure in 2 baseball towns he didn't last long in. The other pieces of this trade are pretty much incidental. We know McCarver would be a Philly. He'd be catching a lot of Carlton's games. But most of this trade has been consummated, but it was done differently. So, with this blockbuster, hopefully this will be the biggest and most confusing. I won't have anything as confusing as this again. Let's take a look at some of the other transactions and think of if I will do anything with it. We're releasing Ken Boyer, Leon Wagner, Doug Camilli. They don't come into play. Roseboro, Worthington, Woody Held. They don't matter. Pirates trade Taylor to the Cardinals for Justy. Justy's already on the Pirates. Wickersham, Ron Tompkins, Adrian Garrett. Not consequential. The Padres purchased Danny Combs from the Astros. Interesting, because I have Oakland taking Combs from the Padres. So that's kind of cool that I did that. I'm not going to do anything more with those guys. Ruben Amaro is pretty much done. California purchases Mel Queen from the Reds. That's very good because I got Mel Queen on the Angels. Metro Leafs Ed Charles. Nothing going on there. The Phillies take a shot at a very old Jim Bunning. Jim Bunning is a free agent, or not a free agent. He was put on waivers, or he's put on the trade carousel. And I believe he was picked up by, I want to say, Las Vegas or Portland, one of the expansion teams. But he was picked up. In this case, it was the Phillies. Frank Coggins, Turk Farrell, George Culver, Ray Washburn. Ray Washburn's card's not very good in 70 anyway. Andahar is a free agent. He doesn't bloom for a long time. Oscar Gamble's not particularly good yet. Dick Selma, Phillies for Johnny Callison. Well, I could do this one. I could have... Well, the thing is, Callison is a Philly. Do I want Callison to go to the Cubs? I don't think so. I don't think the Cubs are going to want Callison in my version of this because they have Jim Hickman in right field and Billy Williams in left field. So I probably won't do that. And again, these are very minor deals. So I'm not prone to match up a minor deal. Houston gets Mike Marshall from the Brewers. It's too early for it to be consequential. Again, Twitchell, too soon to be consequential. What am I trying to say there? You get the idea. It's not that important. These guys take a while. Marshall and Twitchell, it takes them until 73, 74 before they're any good, really. Hey, check this one out. The Indians trade Cardinal to the Cardinals for Vada Pinson. I did something like this. I got Cardinal to the Cardinals, and Pinson's on the Indians. So in some, I don't think they were traded head-to-head, but they were traded and ended up on those teams. Jim Pagliaroni was a star from his 69 card. If you followed the league last summer, his career's over, though. You got Fred Wentz, Bourbon, Geishert, and McLaughlin to the Reds for Alex Johnson and Chico Ruiz. This is interesting. Alex Johnson is already on the Angels with a 70 card, so this would have already transpired. He's on Florida. McLaughlin is still on the Angels. The Reds ended up with nothing out of this trade except for Rabone and Geishert, I guess, who are still in the minor leagues. Paul Doyle to the Angels. Then you got the Rule 5 draft. Again, mostly young players who aren't very important yet. So we can skip the Rule 5 draft. We're getting into December now, 69. Garrett, LaRose, Osinski, Upton, Jim Britton, Larry Jester. None of these guys are of consequence. Here's an interesting trade, though. The Braves send Philippe Alou to Oakland for Jim Nash. Well, Jim Nash, his stint in Oakland is pretty much over, but he's also not very good after this. So this would have been a win for the A's in this trade, getting a Philippe Alou for basically nothing. However, Alou ended up on the Arizona Diamondbacks, an expansion team, which is better. Expansion teams need all the help they can get. So I'm kind of glad Alou is on Arizona instead of the A's. Oh my goodness. How about this is important. I mean, this is an important trade. The Royals trade Joe Foy to the Mets for Bob Johnson and Amos Otis. And all three of these guys have played important roles in my carryover league. Joe Foy helped the Mets win the World Series. He really did in the last summer, if you followed it. He played third base, ace stealer. He led off or batted sixth. He really helped the team. But Bob Johnson and Amos Otis went to the Royals. This is a win for the Royals, right? For the long term, because of Otis. But Bob Johnson, the Royals didn't hold on to him long enough. He had a great 69 year, or his first year in the carrier league with the Royals, but the Royals traded him to Texas. Should have held on to him. This guy was pretty good. Obviously, he held on to Amos Otis. So it's pretty cool to see those three names in one trade. The Royals will be fine. The Mets will be fine. There's no winner or loser here. Both organizations are in really good hands as far as where the talent is aligned in the carryover league. All right, the next one, Sparmer Robertson. Nothing big deal there. Blefary for Pepitone. Pepitone still has some juice. Blefary does not. So I would give the Astros the win on that one for Pepitone. He's still good. Blefary isn't. Brunette, Baldwin. Joe Niekro is not a good trade piece at this point. He still hasn't quite mastered the knuckleball yet. He's not really good until the mid to late 70s with the Astros. Pat Dobson's getting old. Well, no, Pat Dobson hasn't arrived in Baltimore yet for his 20-win season. He is on the Orioles in my league. Rich Nye for Boots Day. Boots Day's on the Expos. December now. Mudcat Grant to the Cardinals. Yeah, Mudcat's on the Ohio Players expansion team. Here's an interesting trade. Al Dowling and Frank Fernandez for Cater and another guy. But the thing is, the A's don't hold on to Al Downing and Frank Fernandez. Al Downing gets flipped to the Dodgers. The Indians trade a bunch of guys here. Nobody stands out. Dave Nelson is a young player, needs time. None of these guys here. Rehberger, Barton, Etheridge, and Herbal. Really, none of those guys are worth much at this point in the timeline. Ray Euler for Kubiak. Fun players. Fun shorts. Okay, this guy's a 2E27 at short. This guy's a 2E19 at short for the trivia guys out there with their 69 cards. Kind of cool. All right, now Tiant getting traded from the Indians to the Twins for a bunch of guys, including Nettles and Ulander and Bob Miller. Great names in this trade, but they're all someplace else. Tiant's on the Red Sox. Williams is a Twin. Nettles, I've already advanced to the Yankees. Gosger and Heiss. Oh, by the way, the Mets traded Bobby Heiss. Bobby Heiss helped them win the World Series, believe it or not, as the fourth infielder, middle infielder, played when guys got hurt. Traded for Dave Marshall and Ray Sadecki. Sadecki had some nice years with the Mets. Dick Simpson, Steve Whitaker, Bobby Bolin, nothing much there. Dalton Jones, Matt Chick. Big trade here with a lot of players' names, none particularly that good. Angel Bravo got like 50 at-bats for one of these teams and got into the league with his card. Beauchamp, mostly a pinch hitter, +5 arm outfielder. You don't want him out there. Pete Ward, Mickey Scott, Ado Velez, Roseboro. And then you have amateur free agent signings. I'm not really concerned with these. I'm really just looking at moves and moves that happen during the season. So we can start scrolling down until we get in towards spring training. Nobody special here. Here's a big name in this one. The Brewers trading Mincher for a bunch of guys, including Ken Sanders, Roof Sanders, Kraus Hirschberger. That's a lot to give up, Oakland, just for Don Mincher. Okay, the 70 amateur draft, we can skip over that. Again, you'll see a lot of young guys who don't develop until 3 or 4 years. And then you're seeing some minor trades. Mangori moves to the Indians. He's on the Indians for me now. Right here, February of 1970. But the Indians happily have him right now. Hanson, Theobald, Grisenda. Nothing on the big scale here. And it goes to April 1970, opening day pretty much, and it stops. Now, there would be more transactions after April 1. And how long have we been doing this? 60 minutes. Let me just take a peek into next season's transactions after April 1, because apparently there's going to be more as they overlap. I want to see what happens after the season gets started in April. So here we are again. Billy McCool for Steve Hunts, no big deal there. Russ Gibson, not much in that trade. Not much there. Not much here. Oh. So the other part of that Cardinal trade with the Phillies, Cardinals traded Kurt Flood. This is part of that the big trade with Dick Allen. The remaining part of it was consummated here. I'm guessing opening day back in 1970 would have been after April. Of course, in modern times it's in March, but I'm guessing by now the season has started. That's a minor trade. Nothing exciting happening here. And nothing much happening here. Oh, oh wow, this is pretty cool. How about, I like this. So the Angels trade an outfielder, Reichert and Aurelio Rodriguez, for Ken McMullen. Interesting. The funny thing is, McMullen, yeah, I think he is on the Angels. This trade did happen, but the pieces were different. Reichert, I think the White Sox got involved. So Reichert was with the Senators. Aurelio Rodriguez was actually on the expansion Las Vegas team. But all these teams changed hands. It's interesting that they were in the same line here. And mostly it was because McMullen needed to move and Reichert needed to move, as they were blocked by other players. Free agency. Another trade here. Another trade. Wayne Comer, nice player, but no. Boots Day for Jack Hyatt. That'd be a nice trade. A one-way playing center fielder and an on-base machine catcher, Jack Hyatt. Keep going down. A lot of players mentioned in this trade. Ooh, including Clendenon. The Mets traded a player named Later and these guys to the Expos for Clendenon, meaning that Clendenon left the Mets and came back. I don't recall that. Let me just take a peek at that. I'm kind of curious. So he's on the 69 Mets. Okay? I must be reading something wrong. He's on the 69 Mets. Right? Wins a World Series hero. So he's on the Mets on the second half of 1969, and he stays there until 72. So what am I reading here again? May of 1970, after the New York Mets have won the '69 World Series. In May of 1970, the Mets traded a player to be later to the Expos for Don Clendenon. I don't think that's correct. Something weird's going on here. I'm either reading this wrong. If you guys want to comment on the comment box here if I'm reading something wrong here, but this does not look right to me. I'm just going to keep going and look at some more transactions because it's fun to look at transactions to see if they line up. Jerry Johnson, Frank Lindsay, nice players moving along. Nothing really stands out, and now we're getting close to the trade deadline. Another amateur draft. The trade deadline will be near the end of July. Let's see what heats up here in 1970 in the trade deadline. Beauchamp, amateur free agency in June. And we're seeing some of the same trades popping up. But no blockbusters. That's important. The blockbuster deal was the Dick Allen deal. That was the big deal. That had to be done. And I decided to do one Dick Allen transaction instead of three. This, I didn't find it to be. Plus, it's a lot more confusing to have to do the trade to do three times instead of just letting him go to where he wants to play anyway, which is the White Sox. Yeah, and we're into August, so we're past the trade deadline. And I think that's a wrap right there. The last few at the end of the month, where guys have to pass through waivers before trade is done, nothing really stands out. So that was a look at the 69 transactions, and it's kind of nice to not have to bear the same level of attention Major League Baseball had to what I'm doing. I can do what I want to do and be competitive with this carryover league without the shadow here. Again, it could be Dick Allen getting to his rifle spot. We talked about Joe Morgan getting in his rifle spot in a couple years. There will be a Dave Johnson going from Baltimore to Atlanta in the '73 as he hits 41 homers. That transaction will be interesting to do. Let's see what else. We got Ken Holtzman from the Cubs to the Oakland A's already, which is very important for the timeline. And Frank Robinson will be, most likely, he'll be moved in this off season from Baltimore. And we're going to move him to the Cleveland Indians because they need a great player. They're the worst team in the league, the Indians. And Frank Robinson would help them a whole lot. So we talked about that in a previous video, but let me just kind of recap that and we'll call it a wrap. So the trade hasn't been made yet, but let's take a look at Hall of Famer Frank Robinson to show you what I'm up to here. So, you know, we talked about, 69, of course, 65, the Triple Crown, the World Series, another World Series in 70. But he has this weird sort of thing going on. It's 72 with the Dodgers, 73 with the Angels, 74 with the Angels and Indians. So what I'm doing is I want to get him to the Indians as soon as possible. So because he also becomes their manager and because they really need him. And I like the idea of somebody really wanting Frank Robinson, just like the Orioles really wanted him after 65 when the Reds didn't want him anymore. So I think Frank Robinson to the Indians, while he's still got some good numbers in these latter years with the Orioles, would help the Indians a lot. And that would put them, as for a team with the worst record in baseball, trying to make the playoffs the following year, that would help the Cleveland Indians a lot, competing against the Detroit Tigers who went to the World Series last year. So that Frank Robinson and Dick Allen are probably going to be the biggest chips in the hot stove league. And that's it tonight. Next time, I'm going to take a peek at the transactions at the end of this timeline, 1973, to see if there's any gems there that I want to match up. All right, I hope you're enjoying this kind of analysis. Thanks for checking it out. We'll see you next time.